Welcome everybody to another episode of Lockdown 23 in 1. That's right, today we're going to be jumping all across the country with some lockup related news. Unfortunately, every last story I'm bringing you today is about an inmate losing their life. You know, jail and prison can be a very risky place, and that's why I'm here to show you what could happen if you decide to risk it. So let's get right into it. If you enjoy this type of content, all things lockup and crime related, then this is where you want to be. Hit that like, subscribe, notification bell before you leave, and check out my playlist with many more videos for you to start watching today. Now, for the first story, we're traveling down to Bexar County Jail in Texas. The title of the article is Bexar County Pays Out $2.4 Million Settlement to Family of Inmate Killed in Jail. Curtis Smith, 66, was killed by a fellow inmate who used a sock and a bandana to choke and suffocate him in a holding cell. Mark Anthony Wong is charged with murder. In January 2022, Wong was found incompetent to stand trial and was committed to the state psychiatric hospital. Now, first and foremost, someone made a big mistake. They're putting him in holding cells with bandanas and street clothes. I mean, come on, this is 2024. Even if you put him in a cell with street clothes, back in the day when I was going in and out of jail, they're at least going to take your belt and shoelaces, pat you down, and if you got a bandana, I mean, that's for sure coming off you. But this is another thing. It says Mr. Smith, the individual that died, was arrested on a warrant for assault following a welfare check after he was wandering the street near Southside Lions Park. Probably a simple dispute, landed with a misdemeanor assault, basic little welfare check, but somehow ends up in a cell with Mr. Wong, who had been arrested for shooting his roommate. It goes on to say that they were placed in the holding cell with a third inmate, and they all remained in their street clothes, including the bandana that Smith was wearing, which was used to choke him. So Smith, the one that died, it was his own bandana that was used to kill him. That right there kind of blows my mind a bit. If you were younger and you found out how you're going to die and they say, you're going to die by your own bandana, you wouldn't believe it. Even if I didn't believe it, I would never carry a bandana for the rest of my life, for sure. That's a fact if someone told me that. The lawsuit alleged that the jail did not appropriately classify the detainees by conducting risk assessments, which I agree. Yeah, homeboy's in there for trying to kill his roommate. You got another guy out there wandering the streets, getting into little disputes. Now, in the lawsuit, it states that Mr. Smith, after he was found dead, they moved Wong to another cell and immediately tacked another inmate biting his nose off. The case was litigated for several months and parties reached an agreement in February, according to the constitutional rights lawyer Dean Malone. The money was paid by the county's insurance company and final disbursement occurred this month. So a lot of people say, man, during these situations, man, that's our tax dollars. But keep in mind, a lot of these places, they do have insurance companies that pay it out. So it's not all the time. But let me say this about a story we already covered out in New York. A father just got awarded, what was it, like 95 something million? I can't remember exactly, but for the death of his son. But what I didn't mention in the story because I didn't know, the state could have settled for like 25 million, but they decided to take it to court and ended up paying over 90 million. Crazy, huh? I bet someone got fired behind that. But rest in peace to Mr. Curtis Raymond Smith, 66 years old. Now the next story is coming from North Carolina, but we gotta travel back to 2012 to see where it all began. Coming from McDowell County, a jury found a man guilty for murdering a girlfriend's 20-month-old child. 33-year-old Christopher Michael Edwards was convicted of first-degree murder and felony child abuse. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But of course, this story doesn't end there. Let's go into the penitentiary and see what happens to this child killer. Traveling down to Scotland Correctional Institution. Christopher Michael Edwards, 39, was found with multiple stab wounds in a housing unit common area at about 9 p.m. Prison staff and emergency care attempted to save Edwards but were unsuccessful. Edwards was pronounced dead at about 10:30 p.m. So what happens to child killers in prison? Not all of them, but some of them. They end up getting killed by other inmates. If I were to guess, that's what happened here. Someone in that high-level prison found out about his crimes and decided that he deserved the death penalty. Now, I don't know if that's a reason, I'm just guessing. But if that was the case, this also goes to show you that, people with bad crimes and stuff like that, they don't get got immediately. Sometimes it takes some time, depending on what prison they're in and what kind of inmates they're housed around. Either way, this is what many people call prison justice. Now, the next story should be a rude awakening for many people, especially individuals trying to be a dope dealer in jail. Traveling down to Allen County, Indiana. According to probable cause filed with the Allen County courts, Brian Boggs and Tyler Hunt are both being charged with dealing a controlled substance that resulted in the death of an inmate. Stephen Matthew Perry Jr., 27, was found unresponsive in the jail. According to the court documents, Perry Jr. was determined to have died from a drug overdose. He had previously had contact with Hunt and Boggs, which led to the investigation of the inmates. So they probably ran back the video footage to see who all came into his cell within that time period. If I were to guess, a few other people probably came to his cell and they were looking at them as well. Well, I should have continued reading. It says in court documents, Hunt and Boggs were said to have been seen on surveillance video entering the cell of Perry prior to his death. In this video, according to the court documents, Perry appears to act unsteady on his feet before entering his cell. Hunt and Boggs were then seen going to Perry's cell multiple times to check on him until he was found unresponsive by other jail inmates. So that tells me that whatever Perry got from those individuals, he took it, went back to them and said, look, bro, something ain't right. This ain't how I'm supposed to be feeling off of this. So he wobbles himself back into the cell. Hunt and Boggs is freaking out now, so they're going back and forth to the cell to make sure he ain't dead. They already know what time it is. He's ODing, and like I said, chances are they already know it and he knows it. Hunt and Boggs, they know that if they go ask for help, they're going to get caught up and everything. So when he started going downhill, they probably just left the cell and said, man, we're just going to let this play out. Don't say nothing to nobody. But that's not the case, man. In jail, everybody sees everything. Even the weakest of individuals that you think has nothing to do with anything. They have a part to play. Called drop and die, man. Y'all are stuck in that cell block. Someone's watching. Detectives spoke to multiple inmates about Perry's death and found out that both Boggs and Hunt were dealing drugs in exchange for commissary items. The affidavit states that it was revealed that both Boggs and Hunt had a history of bringing drugs in the jail. Now, according to other interviews with inmates, they informed the detectives that Perry purchases drug from Hunt and Boggs for 6 bags of chips and 6 cups of noodles. Now, this is a crazier part, all right? Another inmate in the jail later on OD'd and was taken to the hospital, but he survived. It says the inmate was able to recover and the detectives were able to interview the inmate. During that interview with detectives, the inmate revealed that Boggs had sold him the stuff. And this is even wilder, man, and this is why I say it should be a rude awakening to some people. A lot of guys like to get locked up and still try to keep that high. But they don't know where that stuff's coming from, man. And people are dying in prison every day because of it. These guys thought they were buying cocaine, but really it was laced with the majority of fentanyl. Good night, sleep tight. That's what I call that stuff. So multiple things we can learn here. Dope dealers trying to continue it in jail. You gotta remember, these guys' tolerance is at 0. Sometimes they like to take it up a little too high. They die, trust me, they're gonna find out they got it from you and you're gonna be held responsible. And to the users, man, you have no idea what's in that stuff. Especially when it first hits a compound, nobody knows. So there's a lot of risk involved, man, when you're trying to play this game. But these guys now are definitely facing decades in prison. But to wrap this story up, what really blew my mind is that he paid, 3 cup of noodles and 3 honey buns for something that was going to kill him pretty much instantly. He paid to die. Sad, sad story, man. Now, last but not least, we're traveling down to Nebraska. The Nebraska State Penitentiary is facing another lawsuit. On November 6, 2020, about a week after Carter was housed in the same cell at the Nebraska State Penitentiary with inmate Angelo Bowl, Carter was found unresponsive under a bed sheet. At the time, Bowl, who was 40, was serving a life sentence for shooting and killing a former co-worker. Carter was serving a 6 to 9 year sentence for assault with a deadly weapon in association with a street corner stabbing. The lawsuit filed in November but amended earlier this month stated that the prison medical officials were aware of the dangers posed by Bowl, especially when he was unmedicated. Despite that, officials ended the involuntary medication of Bowl, who had a history of schizophrenia, delusional disorder, and paranoia. That decision led to Carter's death, according to the lawsuit. And I can completely see that happening. You know how many inmates I've been around that were completely cool while they're on their meds? As soon as they get off them, man, they're animals. Not even playing, man. Like ready to attack anybody. Completely on edge, man. Not even the same person. But if you're to ask me, they should never put Carter in that cell to begin with, where he was doing a 6 to 9, housed up with a murderer doing life. That should never happen, man. I don't care what the case is. Too much risk involved. Not to mention Mr. Bowl, he warned the staff. They said the lawsuit alleges that Bowl told prison officials he didn't want to be housed in the same cell as Carter because he thought Carter was connected to the Sudanese tribe and they hired Carter to kill him. That right there for the CO should have been a green light special to get Carter up out of that tank. But they didn't. They left him there to die. Also, like I said, this is very similar to another situation that took place in Nebraska Prison. I don't know if you remember me covering a story about Terry Berry, but he was strangled by his cellmate in a two-man cell that was designed for one. And that's the same situation with Mr. Carter and Bowl. They're being forced to double bunk in a single-man cell. I don't even know how that's possible. Every single man cell that I seen was extremely tiny. People that's never been locked up couldn't even imagine one person sleep in it, let alone two. So being in such close quarters with a murderer doing life, hey man, the odds of you dying go way up. Just normal regular individuals probably in there for stealing cars, being that close together, man, they'll end up fighting sooner or later. They could have been best friends on the street, it don't matter. When you're that close in quarters, man, and you got to deal with their personalities, a lot of times people end up dying behind it. But man, even though Carter was in there for some violent crimes, he was only doing a 6 to 9. He had a whole future ahead of him. I went to prison for stabbing a man, you know what I mean? So look at me now, I turned my life around, taking care of 4 daughters, a wife, and a bulldog, and dropping content for you daily. So that's how I look at things, man. Carter, even though he was in prison, man, he had a whole future ahead of him. And the staff completely ignored all the red flags. So yeah, sue the hell out of him, man. Everything about that is all messed up. But that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you enjoyed today's lineup of lockup news. I do have another story that I was going to add into this video, but I decided to kind of go in depth and make it its own episode. So stay tuned for that, not to mention a little tour of Allen County Jail. Keep in mind, Allen County's from one of the stories we did today. While I was looking for footage for it, I found it, so it looks interesting. So we're going to be doing a jail tour here soon. So hit that like, subscribe, notification bell. I don't want y'all missing a thing. Until the next time, as always, y'all be easy, be safe, and more importantly than anything, stay free.